If you're contributing to EPF right now, something changed on 29th of June that most people still don't know about. Not a small tweak. The government replaced EPS 95, the pension scheme that has been running since 1995, with something called as EPS 2026. Alongside it, two other schemes got replaced too. Now, if you're unaware of this, it's fine. Existing pensioners get everything automatically. No fresh paperwork. But there are real changes here. Your PF contribution rules got clarified in a way that could affect your overall take home. Withdrawal rules got simplified, and there is a number going around 7,500 that a lot of finance channels are treating as confirmed, but it is not, which I'll be talking about in this video. So in this video, I'm walking you through exactly what changed, what did not change, and what you actually need to check for yourself. Quick note before we start. This video is based on the official notification and the information which is publicly available. It is only for educational purpose, not personalized investment or any kind of tax advice. So, for your specific case, do check with your employer's HR or a qualified tax consultant or an investment advisor. Hello everyone, my name is Latish and this is Alt Invest. I am not a SEBI Registered Investment Advisor, so nothing here should be taken as recommendation. If you need advice specific to your situation, please consult a SEBI Registered Investment Advisor. Let's start with some basic facts. Because half of the confusion online is people not knowing what actually got notified. From June 2026, three schemes came into effect together. The Employees Provident Fund Scheme 2026, the Employees Pension Scheme 2026 and the Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme 2026. These replace the old frameworks which were earlier there. EPF Scheme 1952 is gone, EPS 1995 is also gone, and the Employees Family Pension Scheme 1971 is also gone. All three got folded into this new 2026 version. Why does this matter? Because this isn't a rate change or one-line circular. This is the legal foundation of retirement savings for close to 8 crore active EPFO members. And here's the part that actually matters to you today. What happens to people already drawing a pension under the old EPS 95 scheme? The answer was very clear. Every pensioner already receiving EPS 95 or family pension benefits continues to receive them automatically under this new EPS 2026. So no fresh applications, no new forms, nothing changes for them. That one clarification should settle a lot of confusion that has been floating around. So think of it this way. This is not a new scheme replacing your benefits. It's the same benefits sitting inside a new legal structure with a few genuine operational upgrades. Let's go through what actually stayed the same and then what's genuinely different. I want to spend a minute here because this is the part most videos skip, and it's honestly the more reassuring half of the story. The pension formula has not moved. It's still monthly pensions equals pensionable salary multiplied by the pensionable service divided by 70. Pensionable salary is still your average monthly salary over the last 60 months before you exit the pension fund. If you already know roughly what your pension is going to look like, the math has not changed. The minimum pension is still 1000 rupees a month. That's been the floor since September 2014. And despite years of pressure to rise it, it hasn't moved under EPS 2026 either. I'll come back to this in few minutes. There is a specific number being thrown around that you need to be careful of. Contribution rates have not changed. Your employer still puts 8.33% of the pension eligible wage into EPS. The central government still adds 1.16%. And if you had already exercised the higher pension joint option under the old EPS 95 rules, that status carries forward. You don't lose anything and you don't need to reapply. So genuinely, if you're already retired or already drawing a pension, this video probably doesn't change your life. What it does change is how the system runs for everyone still contributing. That's where we go next. Let's compare the old PF with the new PF and the 1800 rupees question. This is the part generating most confusion, and this is worth getting exactly right. Here is the headline everyone's repeating. Mandatory PF contribution is now capped at 1800 a month. Sounds like a brand new rule, right? Actually, it is not. Here is what's actually going on. The statutory wage ceiling for PF has been 15,000 rupees a month for years. Mandatory contributions has always been technically been 12% of that ceiling, which works out to be exactly 1800 rupees. That number is not new. What's changed is that government has made it explicit and consistent. Under the new EPF scheme 2026, mandatory contribution is calculated only on the first 15,000 rupees of wages. That's it. Anything you contribute above that, whether that's employer share or employers matching the share, is now clearly labeled as voluntary. Why does this matter practically? Because a lot of employers, especially companies that structure salaries on CTC basis, were calculating PF on the full basic salary, not just the 15,000 ceiling. If your employer does that, this new rule gives both of you the option to get it back to 1800 rupees mandatory minimum and treat anything above that as separate voluntary contribution, either of you can increase, decrease or stop. One thing this is not. The wage ceiling itself has not been raised. There has always been talk of pushing it from 15,000 to 25,000. That has not changed. As of this video, 15,000 is still the number. Now, let me put the old and new side by side so that you can understand it clearly. Under the old scheme, mandatory contribution was often calculated on your actual basic salary. That could mean a much bigger chunk of your take home going into PF automatically, without you ever choosing it. Under the new scheme, mandatory contribution is explicitly 1,800 rupees a month, calculated on the ceiling which I have shared. Anything more is voluntary, and both you and your employer can adjust the voluntary amount at any time. Practically, this affects two very different people in two different ways. If your company is already calculating PF strictly on 15,000 rupees ceiling, nothing changes for you at all. But if your PF was being deducted on your full salary, you may see a small jump in your take-home pay because the excess becomes optional instead of automatic. Whether that's a good news or bad news for you, personally depends on what you actually do with that extra money. We'll come back to that at the end of the video because I think it's the most useful question this whole update raises. Let's talk about the withdrawal rules and how it's simpler now. Here is a change I actually think is a clear improvement. There were 13 separate withdrawal categories: illness, education, marriage, buying a house, repairing a house, and so on, each with its own conditions and paperwork. If you ever tried to make PF withdrawal, you know how confusing that could get. Under the new scheme, that has been collapsed into three broad buckets. One, essential needs, which covers things like illness, education, and marriage. Housing needs, which covers buying, building, or repaying a home loan. And special circumstances for things like natural calamities or unforeseen financial stress. Within these, there are specific limits worth knowing. Marriage-related withdrawals are allowed up to 5 times over your career. Education withdrawals up to 10 times. Now, here is the part that actually protects you, and I think it's the more important detail. You can withdraw up to 100% of your eligible balance for an approved reason, but the rules require you to always retain at least 25% of your total contribution in the account. That's a built-in guardrail against emptying out your retirement savings for a short-term need. Genuinely sensible design, and it's the kind of detail that gets lost when headlines just say withdrawal rules simplified. Claims now have deadline. A quick one here, but worth knowing. If you ever waited weeks for a PF claim to clear, under EPS 2026, pension claims must be settled within 20 days. If EPFO misses that window, they are required to pay you 12% annual interest on the delay. A real accountability mechanism that didn't exist in the same form before. Alongside that, pension disbursement is moving digital through approved agencies. Add UPI-based withdrawals and WhatsApp-based balance checks. EPFO has been piloting and the direction's been clear. Faster to interact, and even though the underlying benefits have not changed. The 7,500 number you need to ignore for now. This is a part which I need to address directly. It's probably the most repeated claim in this whole topic right now, and it's not accurate. You have likely seen headlines suggesting that the minimum EPS pension is being raised from 1,000 to 7,500. Some content frames it like it's already decided. It's actually not. This has been under discussion for a while, driven by real pressure, rising cost of living, demands from pensioner associations, and also multiple committees. Those are legitimate reasons for the demand to exist. But demand isn't policy. The government has explicitly clarified in the parliament that no financial decisions has been made on this. As of the notification of this EPS 2026, the minimum pension remains 1,000 unchanged since 2014. So, if you see a video or article stating the 7,500 figure as a fact, that's simply not where things stand right now. I will obviously update you if that changes, but don't plan your finances around a number that has not been approved. The practical thing nobody mentions. This one's less about 2026 changes, more a reminder while we are here. It genuinely confuses people up, especially for parents already drawing a pension. If you or someone in your family is receiving an EPS pension, you are required to submit a life certificate, sometimes called as a non-remarriage certificate, depending on the case, once every 12 months. This needs to be attested by your bank manager or a gazetted officer. Here's the consequences if you miss it. If you don't submit it within a year of the last submission or from when the pension was first sanctioned, the pension stops after 12 months. The good news is you no longer need to do this physically every single time. There is a digital life certificate that uses your Aadhaar number and it can be submitted through the common service centers. Also, the pension dispersing bank branches. If you have an elderly parent on this scheme, this is genuinely worth checking right now because a lapsed certificate is one of the most common and completely avoidable reasons pensions get interrupted. One more small detail is nominations across EPS and the insurance scheme are all handled through the single form, Form 2, worth updating after any major life event, marriage, a child, anything like that. The question this update actually raises for you is, now, here is what I think is the genuinely useful takeaway from all of this. Because of the 1800 clarification, more people than before are going to find themselves with an actual choice. Contribute more into PF voluntarily or don't, and do something else with that money instead. So let's actually think this through. If you keep contributing above the mandatory amount into PF, here is what you're getting. For financial year 2025-2026, EPF is paying 8.25% interest, and this has been held steady for 3 years running. It's government-backed, tax-free up to 2.5 lakhs a year in contribution. But your money is locked up for long term. Withdrawal only permitted for specific reasons we just covered. Instead, you route that voluntary amount into something like mutual fund or different assets like debt mutual fund. The profile looks completely different. There is no guarantee attached to the return. It's market linked, which means real ups and downs, including years where you could be underwater. But historically, over long horizons, equity has the potential to outpace a fixed instrument like PF. And unlike PF, it's liquid. You're not locked into a wage ceiling or withdrawal category. Neither of these are automatically the right answer. If you're closer to retirement or certainty matters more to you than growth, staying with guaranteed government backed options makes complete sense. If you're 28 with 25 or 30 years of runway, you're comfortable with volatility along the way, the growth potential of market linked route becomes a lot more relevant. I'm not going to tell you which one to pick. That would depend on your goals, your timeline, and how you personally handle risk. What I would say is don't let this decision default to whatever your employer was doing before. Now, that's a choice which actually you can make. Here is my summary and a short version of what we discussed. EPS 2026 didn't take anything away from the existing pensioners, confirmed directly from the government. The pension formula and the minimum pensions are unchanged. What it did change is largely operational. A clearer 1,800 mandatory PF number, simpler withdrawal categories and a 20-day claims deadline and more digital access. And the 7,500 figure you keep seeing everywhere is not policy yet, so don't treat it as one. If this changed anything about how you are thinking about your own PF contributions, or if you have got a parent dealing with the life certificate process, let me know in the comments. I ensure that I read every one of them. One more time, this video is only for educational purpose, not investment advice. Specifically, not personalized advice. If you're looking for personalized advice, it's always recommended that you go through a SEBI Registered Investment Advisor. If you found this video useful, do hit the like button, subscribe to our channel where we publish videos like this every week. Thanks for watching and have a good day.